Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be learning about osseous tissue or bone tissue and the cells that make it up. Now our story is going to begin on the surface of any bone, such as this long bone here, in the periosteum. Now the periosteum, remember, has an outer fibrous layer for the attachment of muscles and an inner layer of osteogenic stem cells. Now this is also the case in the endosteum as well as in the fetal tissues called the mesenchyme. But for today, we are just looking at the periosteum. It works the same way in the other places. And so these stem cells can be triggered to differentiate into what are called osteoblasts. Now these are the bone building cells. So what does that mean? It means that they are literally depositing bone onto the surface of the long bone in this case. How do they do that? Well, they secrete osteoid. Osteoid is the organic matrix, the organic component of our bone. They also secrete enzymes. Now, these enzymes are actually going to carve out little sites within the mostly collagen organic matrix for the attachment of hydroxyapatite. And so hydroxyapatite is essentially calcium and phosphorus salts that are going to spontaneously form or crystallize on these sites within the bone or within the osteoid. So ultimately, our bone is made up of an organic matrix and an inorganic matrix. Okay, so about a third of our bone is organic, it is collagen or that is osteoid, and the inorganic component is a series of salts. So we can store salts, calcium, phosphorus, etc., within our bones in these crystallized matrices. Okay, and so this process is called ossification. Now we can see how important both the organic and the inorganic matrices are when we get rid of one of them. Okay, so just as an example here, if you were to take a chicken bone, or in this case, a fibula of a human, and you were to soak it in vinegar, okay, that vinegar is very acidic. And so what it's going to do is it's going to actually melt away. It's going to break down those salt crystals, leaving behind only the organic matrix. And so as we can see in the bottom image, just the organic matrix is super bendy, right? It's very flexible. It can twist, it can stretch. You can think of your skin, right, as being made of a lot of collagen. And so if we remove the inorganic matrix from our bones, it essentially behaves like this flexible skin. Okay, so obviously that is not ideal if we want to stand up against gravity. And so we also need to add the inorganic matrix, right? So why can't we just use the inorganic matrix? Well, if we were to take that same fibula or that same chicken bone, we were to put it in the oven for a while, essentially the proteins, the collagen and other organic matrix components would cook away, right? So they would break down, they would no longer be structurally substantial anymore. And so what you'd be left with is more or less just the inorganic matrix. And so we can see in the top image here that while this structure is very strong, unfortunately, it can be very brittle when it receives force from a different angle than it's used to. And so our bones really are the nice Goldilocks, right? So it's a little bit of organic and a little bit of inorganic, and it really is this perfect combination, this perfect balance between the two of them that gives rise to our really strong bones that can also resist a little bit of twisting and can be a little bit flexible before they snap and shatter entirely. Okay, so osteoblasts are responsible for, of course, secreting the osteoid, the organic component, and facilitating the formation of salt crystals, the inorganic component, onto our bone. Now, osteoblasts are just so good at what they do that they actually get trapped in the very bony matrix that they're making. And so as we can see in the animation off to the right, osteoblasts are secreting all of this osteoid onto the surface of the bone, just deep to the periosteum. And they're so good at this that they actually put osteoid, and therefore bony tissue, on all sides of themselves. And so the osteoblasts get trapped in this new extra layer of bony tissue on the surface of the bone. Okay, and so first of all, we have the bone getting wider. Okay, so now we have a whole extra layer. We can see the whole thing has shifted over to the side here. And also, we have a new population of cells. These new cells are simply the osteoblasts that got trapped. And so now we call them an osteocyte, right? Osteo for bone, site for mature cell. And these osteocytes live within the tiny little cavities that they left for themselves. Right, so they do make themselves a little home within this bony environment. And of course, they can still communicate with one another via the lacuna, or excuse me, via the canaliculi. Right, so if we take a look down here, we can see this is an osteocyte. Again, it used to be an osteoblast, and they can still communicate with one another, getting oxygen, getting nutrients, ultimately from the blood via one another, via these canaliculi. Okay, so the osteocytes are going to maintain the bone, right? No longer are they secreting osteoid. There's no more room, right? No longer are they secreting the same types of enzymes, but they are maintaining the bone matrix. Okay. Now, as we know, bone is an incredibly dynamic tissue, right? Once we have built our bones, they never stop changing. Okay. In fact, bones are constantly being built up by osteoblasts, maintained by osteocytes, and actually broken down by osteoclasts. So osteoclasts derive from the same exact stem cells as the osteoblasts, and therefore the osteocytes. Okay. As we can see in this animation, stem cells are triggered to differentiate into osteoclasts. And so what these osteoclasts can then do from the surface of the cell or even from the endosteum is they can burrow little tunnels through the bone, which can then be remodeled, which can then be reorganized by future osteoblasts to essentially suit the needs of the body at this particular moment. And so osteoclasts are going to do this by more or less spitting acid into the bone. And as we can see, hydrogen ions are going to be released from the osteoclasts, and they are going to burrow a little hole through the existing inorganic matrix. Furthermore, enzymes are released by the osteoclasts that are going to break down that collagen and other extracellular matrix components, right? And all of these things, the calcium, the phosphorus, the proteins, all the amino acids from those proteins, they're all going to be liberated from their bony environment, and they can be used immediately by new osteoblasts to remodel the bone in that area, or they can be put into the blood. Okay, and so osteoclasts and osteoblasts and this balance between building up and breaking down is actually going to be really important in the process of calcium homeostasis. Right, so if we need more calcium, we can break down the bone and put that extra calcium back into the blood. Or if we have plenty of calcium, we can take it out of the blood and deposit it in the bones, making our bones even stronger than they were before, again, based on the needs of the body at the time. And so, in summary, the osteogenic stem cells exist in the innermost layer of the periosteum, the endosteum, same process, but from the inside, and also in mesenchyme stem cell tissue. So in your fetal development, these stem cells can ultimately be triggered via different signals to differentiate into osteoblasts. Okay, and so this is important. Even as an adult, if you, for example, break a bone, okay, you need to be able to fill in those gaps of the break with new bony tissue so that you don't have to wear a cast for the rest of your life. Also, if you decide to start weightlifting today, your bones will ultimately become stronger because now you're exerting more pressure, more force on them, and they need to be thicker to be able to withstand this extra weight. Of course, we know that osteoblasts ultimately trap themselves in the very bone that they create, and then they are called osteocytes. And the osteocytes maintain the bones from then on out. On the other hand, these osteogenic stem cells can be triggered to differentiate into osteoclasts, the bone breaking down cells. And it may seem counterintuitive that we would ever want to break down our bone cells, but if, for example, you stop drinking milk, right? You're not taking calcium into your body anymore. And so you're going to need to break down your bones in order to sustain the calcium needs of your body. So the three types of bone cells are osteogenic stem cells, which can differentiate into osteoblasts, osteoclasts, and ultimately become osteocytes.